At dawn, the HOA president sprinted across my yard carrying an armload of my firewood, which promptly burst into a majestic cloud of purple chalk, glitter, and biodegradable stink dye. She shrieked with absolute panic in her voice, claiming I had filled the logs with gunpowder. The deputy, already on scene for my earlier report, sniffed the air and said in the most deadpan tone imaginable that it was just lavender and onion. The squirrels in the nearby oak tree seemed to applaud. My trail camera applauded even louder. I'm Evan Corcoran, a quiet facilities tech who likes black coffee, honest fences, and winter fires that don't involve committee approval. I live in Pepper Willow Estates, a lakeside subdivision where the bylaws are longer than the Bible and about half as merciful. Enter Valerie Stokes, HOA president, whistle collector, and self-appointed petty arson historian. For 3 weeks straight, my firewood stack kept shrinking. At first I thought it was raccoons getting creative. Then I found wheelbarrow ruts that led from my woodpile directly to Valerie's patio like a breadcrumb trail designed specifically for petty tyrants. Valerie escalated from stealth operations to outright sport. On day 1, she left a note on my door claiming confiscation for safety reasons. The note had her logo watermarked 6 times like she was branding government documents. I watched the doorbell camera footage later and she actually kissed the note before sticking it to my door. Day 4 brought a 2 wagon raid where she wore a reflective safety vest like that somehow made it legal. She had brought 2 other board members with her, and they worked with the efficiency of a practiced crew. They even had headlamps. By day 8, she had installed a wood compliance sign on my fence that read in all capital letters that fuel must be HOA approved. The sign was professionally printed on weatherproof material. She had clearly spent actual money on this vendetta. When I politely asked to see this policy in writing, she waved around a binder labeled Draft Ideas and told me with complete confidence that they govern proactively. She added with a sweet smile that visionary leadership means anticipating problems before they happen, and my firewood was definitely a problem she had anticipated. Day 11 brought a new innovation. Valerie started leaving itemized invoices for storage fees. Apparently, she was charging me $15 per day to store my own wood in what she called the community safety depot, which was actually just her garage. The invoices had line items for handling, climate control, and administrative overhead. Day 14, she organized a neighborhood watch meeting specifically about my woodpile. 7 people showed up. She presented a PowerPoint with photos of my wood stack from multiple angles, complete with circles and arrows like she was briefing a military operation. The fines started appearing in my mailbox with increasing creativity. $200 for rustic disorder. $350 for stack height sass, which I didn't even know was a category. $400 for visual pollution, defined as any outdoor storage that creates aesthetic discord with the neighborhood harmony vision. She even fined me $75 for failure to attend the mandatory firewood safety seminar, which was a seminar she had invented and never actually told me about. She even posted on the neighborhood app with excessive enthusiasm about how if Evan won't store properly, the community will store for him in the spirit of togetherness. The woman was running a firewood protection racket and acting like she deserved a humanitarian award. By week 3, my neighbors started asking questions. A few of them mentioned that their garden tools had gone missing, and their recycling bins had been relocated for compliance. It turned out Valerie had been practicing her authority on other properties too, just not as aggressively. One neighbor told me she had received a citation for parking her car at the wrong angle in her own driveway. Another said Valerie had trimmed his hedge without permission because it violated the sightline standards she was still drafting. I decided to handle this the boring way, which is to say the legal way. I filed a police report for theft and set up trail cameras around my property. The officer who took my report actually laughed when I showed him the invoices Valerie had been sending. He said in 20 years of law enforcement, he had never seen someone bill a victim for stealing their property. He took photos of everything and told me to document every single interaction going forward. Then I called my lawyer, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in property disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in depositions. When I explained the situation, she was silent for a solid 10 seconds before asking me to repeat the part about the storage fees. After I walked her through the entire timeline, including the PowerPoint presentation and the invented seminar fine, she said with barely contained glee that this was the most well-documented case of theft and harassment she had seen in years. We spent 2 hours going through every piece of evidence, every invoice, every social media post. Rebecca suggested we bring in the city fire marshal, which I thought was overkill until she explained that Valerie's safety justification was the linchpin of her entire defense. If we could get an official on record saying there was never any safety issue, Valerie's house of cards would collapse. So I reached out to Fire Marshal Davis, who I had actually worked with on a facilities inspection at my job the previous year. He remembered me as the guy who actually read the fire codes for fun. When I explained what was happening, Marshal Davis got very quiet and then asked if I was serious about the wood compliance sign. I sent him photos. He showed up at my house that same afternoon with a clipboard and a tape measure. He spent 40 minutes examining my woodpile, checking the distance from my house, measuring the stack height, and even testing the moisture content of the wood. Finally, he turned to me and said with absolute authority that my firewood storage was not only compliant with every fire safety regulation, it was actually a textbook example of proper seasoned wood storage. He put it in writing on official city letterhead. But then Marshal Davis got a glint in his eye and asked if I was interested in having a little fun with this situation. He explained that theater smoke powder was completely legal, non-toxic, and often used in fire safety demonstrations. If I wanted to create a harmless but memorable lesson about theft, he could help me source materials that would be dramatic but totally safe. We spent the next hour planning what he called Operation Purple Justice. He even helped me design the hollow logs so they would trigger on impact but not cause any actual danger. Meanwhile, rumors started swirling through the neighborhood that I was supposedly hoarding illegal accelerants in my backyard. Valerie had apparently been telling people at the community pool that she had insider information about dangerous materials on my property. One neighbor asked me with genuine concern if I was building bombs. Another crossed the street to avoid walking past my house. Valerie held what she called a sidewalk press conference with 3 volunteers and 2 dogs in attendance, announcing a preemptive seizure for community wildfire risk. She had actually printed press releases. Nobody from the actual press showed up, but she handed them out anyway. Her dedication to drama was almost impressive. That night, I set out my new logs. These were hollow decoys loaded with theater smoke powder, chalk packs, GPS tags, and a diam pool. Everything was completely legal and pre-cleared with the fire marshal, who grinned like it was Christmas morning when I explained my plan. No explosives. No actual harm. Just spectacle and receipts. The fire marshal even helped me test one to make sure it would create the right visual effect without violating any safety codes. At 5:42 a.m., Valerie and her crew struck again. I was actually awake, watching from my kitchen window with a cup of coffee that had gone cold from anticipation. She had brought 4 people this time, including the treasurer and the architectural review committee chair. They approached my woodpile like they were defusing a bomb, which in hindsight is pretty ironic given what they thought they would find later. Valerie grabbed the first decoy log confidently, and that's when everything went sideways for her. The log erupted into clouds of purple fog and lavender-onion perfume that hung in the morning air like a lavender-scented accusation. The architectural review chair dropped her end of the wagon and screamed. The treasurer ran directly into a lawn ornament. Valerie stood frozen for 3 full seconds, covered in purple chalk dust, before she started shrieking about gunpowder and calling 911 on her cell phone. They bolted from my yard in a complete panic, leaving the wagon, their headlamps, and what looked like a printed checklist of items to confiscate. The GPS breadcrumbs pinged a tidy path directly to Valerie's garage like a treasure map designed specifically for law enforcement. Each tagged log sent its location every 30 seconds, and I watched on my phone as they traveled 3 blocks east, turned onto Maple Street, and came to rest at 847 Maple Street, which was Valerie's address. I texted Deputy Martinez, who was literally parked around the corner as we had agreed. He had volunteered for this detail after reading my police report, telling me with a completely straight face that this was the most entertainment he had gotten from a property dispute in his entire career. He followed the lavender-scented trail, which was extremely easy because the purple chalk dust had left footprints and wagon wheel tracks on the sidewalk like the world's most obvious crime scene evidence. Marshal Davis arrived right behind him, body camera already recording. They found Valerie's garage door open, and inside was a stack of my split maple wood with HOA stickers slapped on each piece like ransom notes. There were at least 3 cords of wood in there, neatly organized by size and labeled with dates of confiscation. She had literally been cataloging her theft. The deputy started taking photos while Marshal Davis cheerfully read from the fire code book about unlawful taking, tampering with property, and the particular dangers of moving seasoned wood into a closed garage, especially if one were, as he put it with impeccable timing, panicking and not following proper ventilation standards. Valerie tried to explain that she was protecting the neighborhood from explosive materials. The deputy asked her why, if she truly believed my logs contained gunpowder, she would store them in her attached garage next to her water heater. She didn't have an answer for that. Marshal Davis asked her if she had called 911 to report the supposed gunpowder. She said yes. He asked if she had mentioned that she was actively stealing the supposedly explosive materials at the time. She went very quiet. The other board members who had helped with the raid were sitting on her curb, still covered in purple dust, looking like they were seriously reconsidering their volunteer positions. The emergency hearing arrived faster than Valerie could spin her narrative. She showed up wearing a pantsuit the color of a threat and carrying 3 binders, a poster board, and what appeared to be a professionally printed banner. She had brought her own legal counsel, a nervous-looking attorney named Bradford who kept adjusting his tie. The HOA board members sat behind her like uncomfortable backup singers who had just realized they were at the wrong concert. Valerie opened with a slideshow titled Operation Neighbor Safe, projected on the courtroom screen with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she was the hero of this story. Slide 1 featured the HOA logo and a quote about community responsibility that she had apparently attributed to Benjamin Franklin, though I was pretty sure he never said it. Slide 2 showed a grainy still image of the purple bloom with the caption gunpowder in all caps with 3 exclamation points. Slide 3 was a chart she had created showing the alleged danger radius of my woodpile, calculated using what she called proprietary risk assessment metrics. She spoke for 12 minutes about community safety, neighborhood integrity, and her duty as president to protect families from reckless homeowners. She referenced the sidewalk press conference as if it were an official investigation. She claimed she had received numerous complaints about my firewood, though she couldn't produce any written complaints when the judge asked. She finished by saying with absolute conviction that her actions were justified under the Emergency Powers Clause of the HOA bylaws, which she had drafted herself 3 days after my first police report. My lawyer Rebecca stood up with a smile that made Bradford shift nervously in his seat. She didn't use a slideshow. She just calmly rolled out the evidence like she was dealing cards in a game Valerie didn't know she was playing. Exhibit A was the trail camera video compilation, shown on the same screen Valerie had just used. Crystal clear footage of Valerie and her crew conducting 5 separate raids over 3 weeks. The timestamps were visible. Their faces were visible. On the 3rd raid, you could actually hear Valerie saying, "Let's get the good pieces first," which really undercut the safety narrative. Exhibit B showed the GPS trail data overlaid on a neighborhood map. The animated playback showed the tagged logs traveling from my property directly to 847 Maple Street with no stops or detours. Rebecca let it loop 3 times while the judge watched. Exhibit C contained lab results from Marshal Davis confirming non-flammable chalk, non-hazardous smoke powder, and a dye formula commonly used in bank anti-theft packs and theatrical productions. The report explicitly stated that no explosive materials, no hazardous chemicals, and no fire accelerants were present in any of the tested samples. Exhibit D was a printed collection of Valerie's own social media posts where she bragged about community storage and even posted photos of my wood in her garage with captions like "keeping the neighborhood safe 1 log at a time." She had tagged the location. She had used hashtags. She had created a digital confession and apparently thought it made her look responsible. Exhibit E, which Rebecca had saved for last, was Marshal Davis's official inspection report stating that my firewood storage met or exceeded all local fire safety codes, and included his professional opinion that the wood posed absolutely no risk to anyone. Rebecca then called Marshal Davis to the stand, and he testified with the calm authority of someone who had spent 30 years dealing with actual fire hazards. He explained in detail why Valerie's safety concerns were completely unfounded and noted that storing large quantities of dry wood in an attached garage, as Valerie had done, was actually a much greater fire risk than my outdoor stack had ever been. The judge asked Valerie if she had consulted any actual fire safety professional before confiscating my property. She said she had done her own research. He asked if she had any documentation of complaints from neighbors. She said they were verbal complaints that she had taken in the spirit of confidentiality. He asked her why, if she believed my logs contained gunpowder, she would store them in her garage. She said she was planning to dispose of them properly but hadn't gotten around to it yet. The judge blinked exactly once and stated with perfect clarity that this wasn't safety, this was shoplifting with a newsletter. The ruling came down like a hammer, and Valerie's face went from confident to pale in real time. All fines voided immediately, which totaled over $2,000 in bogus citations. Treble damages awarded to me for conversion of property, calculated at $4,800 based on the value of the wood, the cost of replacement, and the inconvenience factor. An injunction against any further trespass on my land, with contempt of court consequences if violated. Full attorney's fees covered, which Rebecca estimated at around $8,000 given the hours she had invested. And a referral to the district attorney for theft charges and filing a false police report, both of which carried potential criminal penalties. The judge wasn't finished. He noted that Valerie had abused her position as HOA president to conduct what amounted to a personal vendetta under the guise of community safety. He ordered her immediate removal from the board pending a special election. He also ordered her to return every single piece of my firewood within 72 hours and to personally apologize in writing, to be posted on the same neighborhood app where she had bragged about taking it. The HOA's insurance company, now very awake and very unhappy, suspended coverage for all board actions pending mandatory training on property rights and legal boundaries. Their lawyer sent a letter that was read into the record stating that they considered Valerie's actions to be outside the scope of her board duties and that she would be personally liable for any damages. The court appointed a receiver to run Pepper Willow Estates for the next 6 months and froze what they called the compliance slush fund pending a full audit of how board funds had been spent. But the criminal referral was what really made Valerie's hands start shaking. The DA's office filed charges 2 weeks later for theft over $1,000, which was a Class A misdemeanor, and filing a false report, which was another misdemeanor. She ended up taking a plea deal to avoid trial. 320 hours of community service splitting and delivering firewood for the county senior center. 2 years of probation. A permanent mark on her record. And she had to wear a vest during her community service that said in bold letters, "I ask permission first." Her attorney Bradford tried to argue for a lesser sentence, claiming she had acted in good faith. The prosecutor pulled up her social media posts and played the trail camera audio where she talked about getting the good pieces first. The judge was not moved. Valerie stood there with her mouth slightly open, staring at the plea agreement like it was written in a foreign language. She had walked into that courtroom expecting vindication and walked out with a criminal record and 160 hours of manual labor ahead of her.